Okay, we'll call the November 7th Planning Commission meeting to order at, what, 6:10, if you put those things down. Who's counting? Okay, the first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And then, next order is to adopt the agenda. Did anybody have anything that they wanted to add? Who wants it?
Did we not have any minutes from our last meeting?
No, I'm still working on those. I wasn't at the meeting, but I'll put something together for the next
There
meeting.
should be one of
Yep,
those things.
exactly, exactly. So.
Okay, all right, then I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
I make a motion to adopt the agenda as planned.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Then new business. The first is discussion and feedback regarding Chapter 111, peddlers, solicitors, and transient merchant approval requirements.
Yep. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Honorable Chair, Commissioners, great to see everybody. Hope you had a great summer. I think it's been since June 7th or something we met last. So
Long time.
It's
Long
been a
time.
while, but it's good to see everybody. So this first item that is in front of you tonight, it's a little bit unique. I'll just preface it. So this particular ordinance in Title 11, Chapter 111, peddlers and solicitors, is not a part of the city's zoning or subdivision ordinances, and that doesn't come under the Planning Commission purview then, being outside of those two ordinances. So it's a little unique in that regard. However, the City Council asked for your feedback and direction, some direction on this. And so that's why we're bringing this particular item. It's a little bit outside of our normal planning and zoning, but I think it does have, it does tie in a little bit, and that's part of what we want to talk about. So with that, I'll just introduce it. We're looking for discussion. We won't be making like an official, there's no official anything to make. There's no public hearing required for us to amend this ordinance, but it's really more to just get some feedback and give council some direction. So council asked staff to bring this in front of you. Really, this transient merchant peddlers solicitors ordinance is an ordinance that licenses or permits, in our case, those are kind of interchangeable words in terms of how we apply it, but it gives the city the ability to permit solicitors, peddlers, and transient merchants, also things like food trucks, some other ones that kind of fall down below this ordinance. In administering these ordinances, one of the things that has come up, and I don't know the whole genesis behind it, but maybe Bobby can speak to that a little bit, is this notion that transient merchants, and I'll define the transient merchants, it's any person, firm, corporation, whether or not a Maple Plain resident, who engages temporarily in the business of selling and delivering goods, wares, or merchandise within the city, and who, in furtherance of such purpose, hires, leases, uses, or occupies any building, structure, vacant lot, parking lot, motor vehicle, or trailer. And the definition includes any purpose, firm, or corporation who sells the items from within the confines of a lawfully established and operating permanent retail sales operation. So if you're inside of a building that's a permitted retail location, you'd just be under our normal business requirements, whatever that is. But if you are outside of that permanent location and you're selling goods essentially from a vehicle, from a trailer, from a tent, you would be subject to this transient merchant. Some
So
examples.
like the farmer's market that?
Well,
is-
so farmer's market would be potentially a transient merchant.
Okay.
And the only reason I say that is sometimes cities just kind of grant farmer's market an exception when they approve the farmer's market to be held.
Okay.
They would accept out, or they would grant permission then for those businesses that come to the farmer's market. This would be more, the ones that I use as an example would be, we have Christmas tree sales out of a parking lot that are done at MPFC.
Right.
We have a garden center sometimes that comes in.
Mhm.
A couple of years ago, I don't know if anybody remembered, out of the what's the ATV motorcycle
yeah.
shop?
Tri-K?
Tri-K. I don't know why I was thinking K-Bid, but Tri-K. They had a chainsaw carving person come and set up
Mhm.
shop for a couple weeks, where they were selling, the chainsaw bears and fishes and whatever
Oh.
else. But, so we've had examples of these kind of transient merchants in the city. And currently, they fall under the same permitting requirements as solicitors and peddlers.
Mhm.
What we've noticed is, in permitting these, they're oftentimes more complicated than just, say, a administrative permit, because they start to involve other aspects of kind of land use. They utilize signage, they utilize parking, they take up parking. They might have issues with how they market or set up location-wise on a particular property, where they block visibility for traffic, or just their sheer traffic that they generate is gonna now stack up on a street, or it's gonna block other business parking, or some of those things we've talked about.
Like the Trump thing in the
Yeah,
plane
the
parking
Trump is a
lot?
good example of the signage, right? That, and
And
then,
the flags.
and then the traffic, right? Where do you enter, where do you exit?
Yeah, just to jump in real quick, Mark, one of the things that, this has come up a few times, one was the Trump setup, just because,
Well, that caused a fight.
well, we'll not go into that, but
That was-
what ends up happening is, and this has been an issue well before the most recent was the Trump setup, but with the flower garden place coming into, then I get phone calls too that, I mean, I understand there's parking requirements for the, well, now it's going to be a brewery, and then also the rest of the strip mall there that utilizes that parking lot. But also, I have some, local businesses in town that also sell flowers,
Yes.
that are brick and mortar buildings, that are paying taxes to the city. And, there's some concerns that they have too, that, well, really anyone can just come in here. And I'm in the position where, obviously, there's background checks that are done in different benchmarks before a permit is issued, but that falls on my shoulders. And quite frankly, one of the things that I would ask for you guys to think about tonight is, I think peddlers and solicitors can be done administratively, but maybe separating transient merchants into, that has to go and get council approval. I think that would make more sense than just an administrative write-off, from my position, because of the impacts that these transient merchants can have. Now, granted, everyone loves food trucks, and those are the examples like, well, it should be fine. But that can have an impact, too, on local restaurants that are brick and mortar. And so that's just something I think would be something for you guys to keep in mind while we have this discussion, that maybe transient merchants should go to city council for approval. Yep.
So, so in that spirit, we've drafted some language relating to transient merchants, and then also peddlers and solicitors. One of the things I did is I provided, I think everybody got a copy of the league
Yeah.
memo. So the league has done a pretty good job identifying some of the issues and then some of the legal requirements. We don't think our ordinance is out of kind of standard of practice. We think it's adequate, but it lumps all three together. And I think from what we've experienced anyway administratively, it's thought that it might be better to separate out the transient merchants and require a council approval rather than an administrative approval. And so in doing that, in updating this ordinance, we also tried to update some of the required information that we would obtain from all permits, so from solicitors, peddlers, and transient merchants. And you can see what we're proposing to strike through kind of our list with a lengthened more increased list that's more in keeping with kind of the league recommended items. And then specifically pulling out, as it relates to transient merchants, some additional information, which would be a general scaled site plan that indicates proposed location and relative area that would be utilized by the applicant. A detailed description with dimensions and site location of any proposed signs to be used by the applicant. And then the proof of appropriate permission to operate on the proposed site is something we had in there previously, but it was kind of buried in the ordinance on the way it was written in there. So we think that starts to it starts to change then the information that would be required. This site plan idea is one that we think is important to review so we can understand parking and parking impacts, sign impacts, sight lines, things like that in terms of parking lots. And then with that, what we say is that people seeking a permit for a peddler or solicitor's license would go through the same process. I just cleaned some of that language up for, essentially they'd have to go through background check, which they do now, but we just kind of clarified some of that. And then peddlers and solicitors can be administratively approved if they successfully pass their background check. And then we say for transient merchants, they would have to go through the same background check, and upon recommendation from the West Hennepin Director of Public Safety, their application would be forwarded to the City Council for final approval, rather than it being able to be approved by a City Administrator. The other thing that this does is it does give public a chance to comment, or at least ask questions, or provide feedback to the City Council prior to the application being approved. So that's kind of an overview. I'd be happy to talk more details or answer questions about it, or I know Bobby's got some other thoughts too if there aren't questions. So
I think it's a good idea to clarify or to make it clearer.
Yep.
Clearer and both for the city and how it's dealing with it. I don't see anything wrong with separating peddlers and whatever, and then transient merchants. One of the things, as I was reading through this in my usual let's pick this, if you are wanting, all of it seemed to me to still be kind of clumped together.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to very clearly say, and part of it, what I was looking for is there always seems to be, like there's a specific period of time
Mm-hmm.
that everybody has to get things done, both the person or the business and the city. And one of the things as I was reading through it, if you're going to the council, or if they have to go to the council, it was very clear that has to be there at least a month before the time that they're literally
Correct.
going to meet. And so that kind of got in my head all kind of mixed up in here, so maybe very clearly separating them and saying, here for, peddlers and solicitors, here's what you need to do. And then here's what you need to do for transient merchants. So you're not saying it is unlawful for any peddler, solicitor, or transient merchant. That's all together. And I know you might be repeating
Sure.
yourself, but if you're trying to very clearly indicate, but that also gives somebody an idea. And one of the things, this is, again, a me thing, okay? When I was working and I would put something together for somebody, I know that people don't always read from beginning to end.
Mhm.
They skip.
And so there were things like, and in particular, with it all together, as I was going through this, like applicant's full legal name. That's number 1 on here, on page 2.
Mhm.
And they have to have, on number 21, one of the following valid forms of legal identification of the applicant. If there's something where like goes with like, so that somebody reading it is going, here are the, 21 or 22 things. Okay. The numbering's a little weird too in here. But
It is, there's a,
yeah,
one
but
goes 20.
so that it all kind of
23.
goes. I think that having them do all of this is really great. I think that the time frame for peddlers and solicitors makes sense, because it's a shorter period of time. One of the questions that I had on page 3 and the number 21, and the A, you talked about card issued in Minnesota, another state, or province of Canada. You very clearly called out Canada. Is there a reason why? Or, I mean, they could come from, I suppose, Mexico too, or other countries? I don't know.
Yeah. Canada's probably the
We're
most
just closer
likely.
to Canada than
So, I mean,
Mexico.
And I understand that,
I don't
but
know if
I
somebody-
also, like, we're trying to, like Lordy, you read
So-
the League of Minnesota Cities, and I don't want someone to say, on one hand, well, you haven't called out this country where these people are from, and so you're being discriminatory.
Yeah.
It just seemed, I understand that we're so close.
That makes sense. I see what you're saying.
But it just seemed.
Yeah,
a little-
it's a good comment. I think we clarify that by just being more general, less specific to
Yeah.
Canada and Minnesota maybe even, and just say that they have to have a government issued identification card that provides photographic,
Yeah.
photo ID and date of birth.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things it also said in here, it was referencing that if they have to have a permit from the county. Does Hennepin County,
Yes.
okay, they do.
So, but we don't know, they can change that. The county can opt in or out on requiring it. The state says that the county can issue license for this, and Hennepin County does, but they could change that. So I don't wanna have to, I didn't wanna change our
No.
ordinance, so I just wanted it to be in there. If the county requires it, then
Yeah,
they have
if
to.
applicable with them.
Right.
Okay, because well, those were some of
Yeah, it's a good question and a good point.
the bigger ones. I think it's a good idea. I think if you're, playing fair,
Mm-hmm.
you should, state. I think the biggest thing for me is I'd probably pull them apart just a little bit more, even if you're
Yeah.
repeating yourself.
If that was a motion, I'd second it. Were you planning on having two separate sections? Because right now, it's all sort of combined still, but if you're proposing to separate transient merchants from peddlers and solicitors, would they simply be totally separate sections as a whole?
Yeah, I mean,
I
I
would
think to your
divide
point,
them.
and if that's the recommendation, I don't disagree with it. I thought through that a little bit, and I'm like, okay, I could break it out, and then I'm like, well, I'm gonna have 21 items. I'm gonna have 20 of the 24 items or whatever that are the same
Same.
exact items. So I was thinking, is there a way
Well,
to?
But a user is
could
gonna
you-
go to it and say, okay, I'm a peddler, or I'm a solicitor.
They're only gonna
So-
go to that.
So they would go to that section and
Yeah.
have to.
Right.
And I think your point's good.
And the only other way around that, and you do that in the book, and I'm somebody that often had to say to people, did you read the whole thing?
Right.
And, because it's important that you read the whole thing. But it's also, one of those things
Cuffs you
where you
back
could
in.
make reference to, even if, whichever one comes first or second, that on the second one, the transient merchant applicant must fulfill, 111.05 A through E
Yeah,
or
it's
something like that. So
good.
you're saying, you're making them still go back to
Sure.
something.
Sure.
I think, to your point, Seven, would they still be like an ABC rather than a new 111.06 or something?
Yeah,
There's
it-
probably, '06.
Yeah, I'd probably add it as, I don't know, I could either do it as another letter, you kind of subdivision of. So I'd have 1105, I could do 1105, yeah, A, B, C.
Otherwise, you just.
I mean, it's up to you. but
1105.
Yeah,
to me,
let me
it
look
makes-
at that, but
It
I-
makes more sense to me to separate them in subsections, so, you
Mhm.
know.
You can go
transient
right to
merchant,
that.
go to
Yes.
this section, peddlers, go to that section, here's everything you need to know for that, here's everything you know for this.
Mhm. Sure.
And kind of keep it clean that way. And I agree, some of this is sort of, kind of run-on, if you will, where I think you could somehow categorize or subgroup, similar types of information that you're looking for, it might read a little easier too. But in general, I think it makes good sense to separate transient merchants if they really are, you know, there's enough, sounds like the issues that you're having are more about, the site, you know, the signage and the
Mhm.
parking and the traffic and that you wouldn't have with peddlers and solicitors,
No.
right?
Right.
So you really are a little bit two different subspecies, if you, I wasn't saying
Yeah.
different animals, but it's more, you know, they're different enough
Yep.
to warrant a separate section. So I was curious, just want to make sure I understood kind of what all the problems were and all the issues are that
Sure.
you've been having. Has it been more about congestion and traffic and parking, or has it been about, you know, local merchants feeling like there's
Sure.
competition
Threat to
coming
them?
in and they're not
Yeah.
paying taxes, or?
It's a
what?
bit of both.
Yeah.
It's a bit of both. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I think there's some pressures too when people come in and they want a transient merchant permit right away. And it's like, hey, you gotta go through a background check, you gotta go through this, but like I was saying before, the impact it has on other elements in the community. But yeah, no, it's, if you, set up a transient merchant location, like at the motel where we had one, you know, that parking is already pretty tight. And when you take up, you know, half the parking lot while you're setting up and going through this, that has an impact then on the business as well, even if the business owner agrees to
Yeah.
the transient merchant.
Mhm.
So I just think it's something that I can see it spiraling out of control is part of one of the deal. I don't think we're there yet, but over the
But we
last
don't
year,
want to be
we
either.
don't want to be there. And over the last year, I've seen a number of different instances where that's been an issue. And so I would much rather look at this a little bit more thoroughly, and then also, like I said, I think it's something the council should be talking about as well.
But since the council only meets once a month
Mhm.
instead of like they used to,
Yep,
twice a month,
yep.
I think your timing, it's 6 weeks to get a permit.
Not necessarily. I
It
would.
could be,
it-
easily.
It could. It would probably be within that month time period, though. It would never exceed that month time period that I can
But
see.
if they came in right after council meeting,
Yep, then they'd be
it
on the
would be
next month.
6 weeks.
I would say it'd probably be whenever the next council meeting is, which would be a month. So I don't ever see it going longer than a month. And other communities too, I know, and I know we're not out of the ordinary by how we approve transient merchants by administratively doing it, but I can speak that, you know, when I worked for the city of Delano, no peddler, no solicitor, or transient merchant was done administratively. It was all done through council. So there was a time frame for some of these businesses to wait, and a lot of them are aware of that. Most of the applications I get anyway are not for starting today. There are a few.
They understand.
And even
There's-
if
there's a
we're
time frame.
starting a question, I want it today or tomorrow,
Mhm.
red flag it almost.
Yeah, it is concerning then, because it's, they already have to wait for a background check. So how staff would handle that internally is if, let's say someone came in with an application for a transient merchant, and they were 3 weeks out from a council meeting. Immediately what I would do is gather all the information laid out here, and then I would already send that in for a background check prior to the council meeting, so that I can go to council and say, yes, this applicant has been approved, or it's pending approval, which then I would ask that if it's not approved yet, issue approval pending approval from West Hennepin in that situation. So we'd get on it right away. It wouldn't be something that we would just, you know, sit on my desk until the council meeting and then do the background check and then delay them out a longer period of time, but.
One of the questions that I had, for the transient merchants, the way that I understood this was that the permit was valid for a year, but for a 2-week period of time during that year.
Correct.
Okay,
Mhm.
and
Or 10
having.
days?
10 days, you're right.
10 days, oh, thank you, Steven. And
Which
having-
would not be long enough for Christmas trees or flowers.
Or flowers. for
Because
flowers.
those two things,
Mhm.
the Christmas tree is probably up shorter, but the
Yeah, the
other, the
garden
flowers,
centers.
for sure.
Yep.
They at
Longer.
least aren't up there the whole entire summer like they used to be.
Correct. I
Years
think I
ago.
narrowed them down to, because I remember,
I
I
thought it was
think,
90 days.
well, it used to be at 90 days, but then I think I shrunk them down to like, I want to say like 60 or 30 days this year. They weren't up nearly as long this
Yeah,
year.
they
Oh, no,
weren't.
they weren't.
Yeah, I shrunk that
So,
down.
taking that in consideration, if you're saying something in here,
Mhm.
then it should
It should reflect.
reflect. I mean, if you genuinely are saying to the tree or the flowers, you only have 10 days,
Sure.
I don't know that they're going to do it. But it would also be a benefit, or I would think that the places in town, like Ace, that has their
Mhm.
own, they would like that better than saying to them,
Yeah.
it's whatever.
They have
I don't thi-
competition
I
for
think
3
I
months.
think 10 days might be too short of
Well,
a period of time.
And I think,
yeah.
I think the way you might be able to do that is set the benchmark for 10 days, otherwise specified by city council.
Yeah, that's actually typical, and I was just looking at that. I thought I had actually done that in this language, but it didn't translate. So
That would
that's
be
actually how
better.
most
Mhm.
of
Because
these are done.
Christmas
is-
trees want before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
So council could set the,
Right.
or extended the time period, but otherwise it would be 10 days.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's a good comment. I think we can add that.
Related to that, because I had that question as well, I would just make sure to clarify whether it's consecutive days or not, especially for solicitors and peddlers, because they can't operate on Sundays. And so does that count as a day, or is it, days of operation?
Okay. We'll specify that.
Back on the approvals, and have the city council approve it.
Mhm.
We throw out a question of whether the planning commission should review it. If we're looking at issues like signage and parking and traffic and
Sure.
congestion, should that be, I know it adds more time, Mardell, but I don't know, I just
I'm-
bring it out as a
I,
question.
I don't have an answer on
I'm
that.
6 of one, half a dozen of the other. The fact that something is so temporary, I mean, even if it was a crappy sign,
Mhm.
it's gonna be gone.
I think I would trust the city to make a good choice on that, for my own personal. But if it was a long-term thing, then I think the planning commission should be involved in it. But something like and really honestly, I thought that the flower place and
Mhm.
and the tree came and got the permits.
Yep.
And followed
Yeah.
And
what
they
the-
always do
what
come
the
in
city
way early.
already did.
Well,
you
I
know.
would think repeat
Yeah.
Yeah.
repeat
Mhm.
vendors are going to kind of know it, like you said.
Right.
And so it'll be on their calendar, like, oh, go get the permit.
Yep.
Sure.
And then set it up, you know.
My experience is most of the vendors that are legitimate vendors come and ask because they understand licensing and they do it right. So they come in and say, hey, and it's April, I wanna I've got 2 weeks in July that you're on my route, and so I'd
Yeah.
like to what do I need to do to get a permit? But, so I think most of them do, but there are still plenty that just kinda swing in and say, let's go, what do I need to
Yeah.
do?
So how
Thumbs
about
down
like
on
the
them.
Swans truck?
That's exempt out.
Yeah.
Yep. Ice cream truck.
How?
It specifically
goes
exempted
to
out of the
somebody's house.
definition for, like, if you go through the whole ordinance and read the definitions, there's quite a bit of people that are exempted out, and,
Yeah.
like, I forget what they call it.
Food delivery or something.
Food order delivery or something is exempted out.
And that's by state law, isn't it? I
Yeah, it
think?
is,
Yeah.
actually.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, I had a question for the planning, since we're talking about it. So one of the things that I noticed was that if we're gonna separate the transient merchants, the hours are very reduced for peddlers and solicitors, which I think is a good thing, because I don't want people knocking on my door late at night or on Sundays. But I think for a transient merchant, like the Christmas trees, maybe we could be a little more lenient in the hours of operations. So how would you guys feel about opening up those hours a little bit, if we separated transient merchants out?
What are the present hours right now, please?
So the current hours, I just had them up, let me see. So
I don't want someone
currently-
at 7 o'clock in the morning at my door either.
Well, so what I'm saying
But
is if
they're
we're
going-
separating
they're going
them.
to
But
be-
transient.
They're
Yep.
gonna be at a location.
Yep.
Right.
So I would either keep the peddlers and solicitors the same, or I'd even be for reducing them even more. But,
You got this 1
yeah.
hour opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
Knock yourself out.
But I think for the transients, because they're not coming to your door, personally,
Right.
you're going to them. So the hours are currently Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m., which I think is fine. But then Saturday and Sunday from 9 to 5, and then there's no door-to-door on Sundays. So I think 9 to 5 is where it's a little bit more restrictive. If you want to go get your Christmas tree after work, you can't, technically.
But they are open.
But they are open after
They're
that.
open.
Yeah, so they're violating,
Yep. So we
violating
w-
our ordinance.
Yeah, we want to make our ordinance reflect the
Okay.
actual
Sure.
practice. So if
Yeah.
you want that practice to continue,
Or-
our
or
ordinance should
would that
reflect
be-
it.
Would you say 8 AM to?
It's 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Monday through Friday, and then 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on the weekends,
Or is that
and no
something
door-to-door
where-
on Sunday.
Where we take it case by case and let the council decide, okay, for Christmas trees,
Yeah.
people do go on weekends, they do, go on
Mhm.
evenings till whatever, 8, 9 o'clock.
Yep.
Seems reasonable. Rather than make it wholesale, have it be at the discretion of the council.
I
That
like
makes
that.
sense.
Same way, just establish a benchmark, but the city
Mhm.
council can expand the hours.
The, the other thing that I'm thinking about that might come into play in the future are food trucks, especially if you have a brewery opening up.
Mhm.
Food trucks next to breweries are a thing.
Mhm.
And so the hours of operation and also the competition, right? Competition for, Gary's and Blackwater and, how we want to think about that as well.
Well, the brewery actually
Yes.
is going to be a restaurant too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't have
Food truck.
food trucks like a lot of other
Well,
locations.
not that they would promote or sponsor, but maybe other food truck vendors might want to come in.
Yeah, but I found that a lot of restaurants that are breweries like that, the breweries that don't have the food component are the ones calling the food trucks, in some sense, and then word gets out, and then they all are coming in there.
Yeah, with that one, yeah, the breweries are notorious for the food trucks, but that's because they want to serve their people. That location's not going to allow food to be brought in from an outside source, so nobody's going to really be able to. You'd have to go outside, eat, and then come back. Yeah.
I do think it's a good question, though, because that was actually my follow-up question, because food trucks actually cannot operate between 4:30 p.m. and 6 p.m.,
Right.
which is dinner time. And I think we should be more friendly to our mobile food operators. We have a young man who started an ice cream truck. I don't know if you saw him at our Night to Night, but, he's a high school student who started his own business. We have forklifts and other food trucks in
Yeah.
town. So that's another hours that
How
I
could
would be
you
open to
not-
opening
how
a little
could
bit
you
more.
not do during the
Supper
dinner
time.
hour?
Yeah. That's what it's an outdated ordinance, I think.
I would imagine that ordinance was put in place like
Mhm.
that so that it didn't affect our brick and mortar restaurants as
Yeah.
much. That it was put in there so that
I don't remember that one.
Yeah.
and it could have
Sorry.
been a long time ago.
Yeah.
Like
Um,
even then the events at the park from, the city put on with
Yeah.
all the food trucks.
Well, the city's exempt from everything. So we exempt ourselves. Yeah.
They write the rules.
Yeah. Yeah. But I would like your
Where
guys'
is
thoughts on
that
opening that
written?
up. So that is
I
111.27
I
under the
think
food
you got
vendors.
that.
Yes.
I think.
No, not memorized. I have
I
it in front of me.
think- I think you're right. Let's update that. 'Cause I appreciate, I appreciate, fair play with businesses in town. But it doesn't seem like a sporting competition, it just doesn't seem fair.
And I think it's more likely that these food trucks aren't just gonna like park themselves outside McGarry's, they're gonna go to events, or they're gonna go to baseball
Yes.
games, or things like that.
Yeah.
Where they're not affecting the local as much, I think.
Yeah, and
Well, I was,
What did-
this
what-
summer I was at I was in
One-
Eugene,
one
Oregon,
event.
and there was my brother took me to a brewery there, and right across the street, there was like 4 food trucks, and they were there semi-permanently. I mean, they had like decks around them and everything, and that's what you did, is you go grab your food truck food and walk across the street to the brewery and sit down and have a beer there. Now, they didn't have a kitchen, so that was probably the
Oh,
distinction,
okay,
but,
okay.
but that was very common.
Hmm.
You kind of have the two work together. And the breweries didn't mind that you brought in food from the food
Well,
trucks.
the 11127, is that what you're saying?
It's 11127,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, we
and
can
it
look at.
says between 1 and 4:30 and 6 to either dusk or 9. I think it could be earlier. I don't think things should be open after 9.
What if you made it like 11 a.m. to 9? Therefore, you got the lunch crowd, and then it's open for dinner as well, and then it's done at 9, and that's the end of it.
Well, I think mornings would be fine. You know, I think of all those parents out at the soccer games early mornings, maybe a coffee truck, you know, Blackwater could have their own coffee truck or something. But maybe limit the sound, so maybe no ice cream truck sounds or things like that at 7 in the morning.
Well, we
You
do
don't
have
like the
limitations
ding,
on
ding,
ding,
sounds,
ding?
right?
Yeah.
So-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep that, but maybe allow them to operate quietly.
I think we do the same thing on this, though. We'd say between the hours of like 9 a.m.
Yeah.
and 8 p.m. or something, or
Or
does-
city council
and
discretion.
then- or city council. So like, if we are permitting our food vendors at a community event, we can actually legitimately
I like
permit
that.
them. Or we can not. Yeah, we can say.
Yes.
We can say no. The city
Yeah.
follows the same rules as everybody else, right?
We can say no to the Irish food truck that wants to park outside McGarry's.
That's right.
There's not. I mean,
Yeah.
usually though they want to go where
Yeah.
they have an event, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're not
It is,
just
yeah.
out on the corner.
Yeah.
No, they-
Usually, except for
yeah.
ice cream, right? Ice
Yeah.
cream's that one anomaly where they go anywhere to
Mhm.
sell all the time. But okay, so I 11127 I've got.
I would open
We'll
it up,
fix
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Do you open the city up for more complaints of like, well, you let the Christmas tree be there for 5 months or whatever, and now you're only letting me do this?
I don't think so. One, I think some of those discussions some of them are a little common sense approach in terms of the Christmas trees. It's pretty common that those folks would be selling at a later time. I don't think we have enough of this where that would be drawn up as an issue.
Well, and I also think that they, the business, I mean, if they came in and they said, well, it says 10 days, and what they're obligated to do then is to say, I want X amount of time.
I want
Just-
to expand
just-
the after 8 o'clock.
Right, just like the tree place did, or just like the flower place did, somebody else coming in, you know, if they stood there and they have to say something in effect, I want X amount of time. And if somebody said, well, no, we'll give you 15 days, and then they came back and said, well, you gave the Christmas tree people, 3 months or whatever, then I think it's a fair thing for the city to say why, or to look at the person and say, well, you're selling X, and I can't see that needs to be out there longer than X amount of time. I mean, it's
It also gives discretion, because I think to the point, I think it's a really good point that, yeah, you could get yourself, but you're gonna take case by case, which I like. I like that cities then have discretion to look and say, okay, what are you selling, where are you selling it, how are you selling it, and what makes sense, right? So then you could say like, like, I'll use my chainsaw guy. He comes in and wants to sell for a week. Maybe it's 2 weekends or something, or it's a week and 2 weekends or something. You're gonna maybe be a little bit more lenient on you know, parking and signage and standards because it's a short time period. Whereas if he came in and said, hey, I want to set up here for the whole summer, you're going to say, well, that site's no good. You need to be located over here. You're going to have parking then. Let's see the signage. Okay, no, your banner doesn't work. You're going to have to put up a legitimate sign and take it down every night or whatever it is. I think then that time period kind of almost correlates with location and use and intensity. And so, you know, whereas the Christmas tree, I think everybody would say, well, Christmas tree's 4 weeks or 5 weeks or whatever, right? I mean, the trees are dead after that, but the flower shop, 3 months, 2 months, right? I mean, but they still don't go all summer necessarily. They
Yeah.
sell their stuff earlier and then, but,
Yeah, I like the discretionary concept,
Yeah.
and it gives, you know, local vendors to come in to talk to the council as
Yeah.
well and say, hey, you know, I don't like the competition, or, you know, whatever the issues might be, and
Yeah,
it should
sure.
be debated in public that way. Speaking of that competition, I imagine these transient vendors don't pay any taxes, city taxes at all, they're just a fee for the administrator?
Correct.
Is that something that should be looked at?
the fee itself, you're not gonna be able to tax them, right? So you're taxing by fee, but the fee itself is discretionary on the part of the council. They set that fee ordinance every year, so you could look at it and say, you know, maybe it's, maybe, I don't know.
I'm just
Maybe
thinking of-
there's a scale to fees, right? If you're there for 3 months, maybe it's,
Yeah, it should be
maybe
Per day.
based
it's
on
0 to
time.
10 days is X. If you go, you know, 10
Well,
yeah,
days to
because
90 days.
that's-
Yeah,
You can do
that's
that
a-
with the permit
For
schedule,
sure.
right, or
Yep.
fees
Yeah.
scheduling.
Yeah.
Because you might get a complaint from a vendor that says, you know, I'm paying taxes here, and yet you're bringing in this
The competition, and he can undercut
Yeah.
because they
Yep.
have no overhead, right?
Yeah,
They're not paying the
exactly.
brick and mortar tax, right?
No, and I'm aware of that one too. I've heard that already
You have?
at
Okay.
times, yeah. I think it's something that, that would be something that council would look at with the
Yeah,
fee
it's
schedule.
not
and
really a
determining that.
property tax because they don't have
Yeah.
property, but, you
Right.
know, some sort of compensation
No, I think that's spot on.
for the impact.
The only thing, don't you have to be careful with that? The permit fee has to reflect the amount of work
That the
that
city
goes
does.
in.
But you
Into
could
it?
have you're right, but you could have I mean, there's gotta be a nexus between the two, but you could have a scale that correlates only from the standpoint that there's more administration, there's more inspection and, you know, things that need to be done the longer you're there, so you could have, you know,
I'm
you
just
Boost that fee
saying
up
you
there.
have to be careful with
do
that.
have to be careful.
Correct.
Fees are a big hot button item for cities right now, so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Can't make money.
You cannot make money.
It just, removes revenue opportunities for the city, and then it reflects poorly then on residents and their property taxes, so.
Yes. Do you
so-
have enough then to go to, y'all?
This is great. Yeah, this is great feedback.
This is what we needed.
Well,
I
good.
appreciate that.
Good. Well,
I had a couple other things I'd written down to talk
Okay.
about, taxes. I noticed there was a section here talked about providing bonds. Is that something that the county does, or is that something that the city would?
That would be for the city. I mean, it's a city requirement, not,
It is, okay.
yeah.
Is that something that's enforced? Or is something, I mean, is it, I don't know, just again, raising the question.
I don't
is
know
it-
if we've ever done it. I guess I can't.
Not that I'm aware of.
So it's an option if.
Yeah.
It's an option.
Yeah, we think there might be.
An issue.
Think of it like a security deposit, right? If there's
Correct.
a possibility of adverse impact that the city might have to come back and clean up.
Yeah, yeah, if there was something along those lines, it's kind of a case-by-case analysis
Yeah.
with that. I mean, if I'm looking at it depends too where the transient is going to be located. If someone's setting up in the park, I may be more inclined to collect that because the city's responsible for maintaining the park.
And
Right.
cleaning
But a
up,
lot of
yeah.
times, these transient merchants are located on private property, where they have agreements already with the property owner. And then I'm not gonna get into that,
Yeah.
because that falls then
That's
as
their
a
property.
responsibility of
Mhm.
the private property owner.
Yeah, so maybe it could be written that way, that bond is required if, or may be required if the business is on city property.
Sure.
Actually, I think that covers everything I was gonna talk about.
Anybody else?
Are we gonna talk at all, any more about the peddlers and the solicitors?
No, that's not an issue
Okay.
at this time. Oh.
I don't recall seeing anything,
Any,
any of this
oh,
on the street.
it happens, yeah, no, oh, well, peddlers and solicitors, we don't get many of them. The ones that we do get are usually, working for like a cable company is the most common, believe it or not.
It's kind of a dying
Yeah.
profession, right?
I had
We're
a
not
kid-
selling vacuums and
Yeah, but I
dictionaries and
had a
encyclopedias.
Now you got Boy Scouts and hockey players
And they're exempt, right?
Yeah,
So
they're exempt, and all the religious
School
people-
sales, religious
Yep.
sales, yeah.
Yeah, I
What
had a
about-
character come up to me though, one day early this summer when I was out doing something in the yard, and, a truck pulls into my driveway,
Oh, sure.
and a gentleman gets out, and he comes walking up, and he goes, how about if I don't know how he said it, but what he was talking, we're
We're doing some windows in the
no,
neighborhood.
we're putting
Driveway.
driveways in,
I
Mhm.
had
down
him show
the
up
street,
at my house.
down the street, and how about if I do your driveway for, it was like some insane, like
Mhm.
$1,200.
Mhm.
And I went, I started to laugh at him. And, and all I could think of was, well, I know I have white hair, but I'm not really that stupid. And I just looked at him and I said, no, I'm not interested. Oh, come on, you could have, you'd never have to do anything else again. And I said, no, seriously. And I didn't even at the time, because it
Mhm.
was so weird. I
Mhm.
didn't think, where's your permit, buddy? I mean, honestly, it was like one of those
Should've
things.
called West Hennepin,
As
yeah.
he was driving away, I'm going, oh, missed opportunity. But it was just, yeah, he was gonna do my driveway for $1,200.
He showed up at my house too.
Should have told them you can do it for free and I'll give you a great referral.
I might have to remember that one next
Yeah,
time.
yeah, that's right.
Just like, oh, people,
Oh, good stuff.
yes.
So seriously though, do those folks have to be permitted?
Permitted, yes.
Oh,
they
yes.
do.
So
Oh,
does
yes.
that also hold true for like roofing companies
Yes.
that
Yes.
come in after a storm?
Yes.
Yes,
Mhm.
yeah.
And many don't, right? I
Okay.
mean, people who do tree removal do it all the time. You'll see them come down the street and
Yeah.
knock on doors and
Yeah.
say, "I'm doing your neighbors," you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, if you ever get that, check their license, because if they're not licensed, who knows what they do?
Odds are they probably aren't.
Oh, I couldn't even imagine, I mean, when I think of the people who have come to work at my house, they would no more go down the road and say, well, I'm putting siding on your neighbor's house, and for blah, 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 I can do yours kind of thing. I mean, which is why I laughed at him.
Sure.
And he had, did yours have, he sounded very, like he had just rolled out of the fields in some southern state somewhere.
Sure.
And it was like, okay, but he must have thought that I fell off the turnip truck.
Well, I always think about, oh, did you see City Hall first before you came knocking at my door? You know, I use that quite a
Did
bit.
ya?
I do.
Good.
Good.
I'll have to try and remember, because it was just so,
Good.
whatever. Anything else on this one? Okay, well then, the next one has to do with health and safety nuisances. And one of my favorite words, blight.
Blight.
I just think it's such a great word. I appreciate city council wanting our opinions on this.
Mhm.
Do you really want our opinions
Yes.
on this?
In fact, we
gonna
want your
come.
help on this.
It's gonna
Don't
come.
say
Yes.
that we didn't ask you that question first. The first thing that came to mind, we all have places that we're aware of that, like, would be on our list of
Yeah,
places to go to. And one of the things that I did when I was reading this, okay, I want to know how serious all of this is. And I'm asking because this has been, for the entire time that I've ever been on here, and even when I was on the council, where nothing makes any difference if nothing is ever enforced.
So that's really the reason council brought this to you guys, because we want to give staff the tools they need to better enforce it. So because it's kind of ambiguous right now in some areas, that we want to be more specific so that there's no question as to whether something is blight, and yes, we'll hold you accountable for it. So that's the whole point, is we want to hold people accountable, so.
I'll put this, I'll say this out there, maybe this will change your tone a little bit on your thought process on this. I have blocked off a day in January to go to court with a property owner in town, and it's not even a business. So I don't know if the city's done that in the past often, but individual's been to court 5 times, I think, already. And he wants a jury trial. So that means I may have to go and testify on what the property and the condition it's in. That's why I've blocked off a day in January. So yes, I would say that this is a very serious topic now with the city council. It has been for the past few years. And the reason why it is here is because we just need some clarification and to review this ordinance, this chapter here, to make sure that some of it is subjective. On how you, and it kind of has to be a little bit.
And I think it always is going to be.
Yep.
But one of the things, and I'm glad, I mean, I'm sorry that you have to do that.
So
I'm
am I.
actually sorry that someone who lives, I look at things like, if you want to do some of the things that are done, go where the minimum lot size is 4 acres, where not a soul sees the crap around your yard.
Yep.
If you're in town, get a grip, people. You have neighbors.
Yeah, you
Some
have
of
to be
them are-
nice to your neighbors.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
and
Yeah, that number needs your 4 acres.
it has
So I
to be
represent
bigger.
cities that have that too, and
They want them to go
you
further
need
west?
400 acres.
400 acres.
And
But
lots of
in
trees.
doing
Lot of
it,
trees.
one of the things that I have no idea, you know, I know that at times, West Hennepin gets involved, and I know that they don't necessarily see that as their job. And I'm gonna just say that and let it sit there, okay? Because I don't have an answer for that. I have kind of a personal feeling for it, but I'll just leave it there. But one of the things around all of that is people would always say, well, there has to be a complaint filed, you know, for somebody to go and say, and I'll use the example because it's been used 500 million times on the corner. Let's see, what's the
And
street address?
it's been
again?
documented many
Um,
times.
Maine, where's Maine?
Maine and Helgren.
Maine and Helgren, okay. And I sat, most of us were sitting
Mhm.
on this when he was allowed to build his
Shed.
which is a pole barn. And I agreed to it, I mean, I did. And, because all of the stuff was supposed to go in there, and the doors go down and everything would be great. And now for, I don't remember how long, there's a porta potty that's been out there
Mhm.
so long that I no longer remember anymore, so it's more than 6 months. But is there something that can be done where, and I appreciate that this would cost money but if we had something where, if the only way is that there's a complaint that gets issued, and then you start the process, is there something where 3 times a year, 4 times a year, the city went looking around and said, this is a problem property, and we're going to be the complainant?
Yeah.
And I appreciate that puts you all in a weird place, But I also know,
Oh, it's not a weird place. I think you're hitting it right on the head. We're already, that's.
You're supposed to be here for our community. and
Yep,
if that
exactly.
is-
and so if it was something where the town knew 4 times a year, 3 times a year, and there could be additional
Mhm.
times, but that somebody's gonna come around and go, ding, you need to do something. And if they haven't done something the first time, then the second ding is something else. I don't know, but
Yeah,